Firstly, we will have a copy of Sea of Stars to give away to one lucky person. Let me know in the comments which of the 5 things I'm going to talk about in the video appeal to you the most in the game. After seeing our review, Sabotage Studios wanted to work with little old us to give you a deep look into what it was we loved about Sea of Stars, so thanks to those guys for sponsoring this episode. Sea of Stars is objectively an excellent game, but there are certain things that make it stand out. We're going to go deep on 5 of those, and I think even if you've played the game, you'll appreciate the amount of work, love, care and attention that went into Sea of Stars. Sabotage Studios set their name with The Messenger, their retro-style platformer that morphed into a Metroidvania halfway through and had an unusual sense of humour all of its own. So there was understandable excitement about Sea of Stars. What are the 5 things that make Sea of Stars so great? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp, and now let's find out. First and most obviously are those visuals. The talented artists over at Sabotage Studios had previously made good use of pixel art with their work on The Messenger. In that game you could switch between an 8-bit style and then morph the world into 16-bit. Even though clearly not on the same scale as Sea of Stars, there's a real quality and a flair, because controlling pixel art correctly, it's not easily done. We've seen so many examples of it coming across as a little cheap, but the team here haven't made any mistakes in that regard. They've controlled their pixel art perfectly. Now the artists, Philippe Dion, who was the level designer, Joachim Hamel, the technical artist, and Mikhail Lavoie, the level artist, have produced some stunning work. I might be mistaken here, but I believe one of them worked previously on a game called Flint Hook that unsurprisingly also had a very distinctive art style. It's a good game that, it's on Switch as well. Some sources for this artistic direction are obvious, the likes of Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, the Dragon Quest series, Secret of Mana, and obviously Earthbound, but there are some really clever rendering techniques here. In fact, I believe the developers actually created a custom render pipeline. This then enables them to use real-time shadows, as well as dynamic lights, not something you'd usually see in a classic pixel art game. Those shadows can even be manipulated, as the game allows you to control the day-night cycle. This is also used to solve some of the puzzles. Reflections from your character can be seen in water surfaces, and there are numerous small animations for little details that often go overlooked. All of these in combination give much more depth to the environments, a sense of perspective and place that makes the image pop out of the screen. It's more than simple parallax scrolling. It makes the 2D appear 3D. And I have to be honest, I cannot wait to see what the next game looks like. Certainly, the irony of it within the same week as one publication stated that within 10 years pixel art games wouldn't exist. Sea of Stars begs to differ, so that's the first thing that makes it stand out for me, and next up has to be the sound and audio. Now, although Yasunori Mitsuda seems to be getting most of the credit, probably because he's so famous for having worked on Chrono Trigger, the vast majority of the soundtrack was actually created by Eric W. Brown, with the other 2 guest composers, Vincent Jackson Jones II and Reese Miller. With the musical scores they created, including small stings and sound effects and jingles, they number in the hundreds, with the Sea of Stars original soundtrack including 200 tracks. And this is top quality stuff. You'll notice 3D surround sound and a shift between the day and night soundtrack. There's a mix here from orchestral, electronic, and some hybrid genres I can't even quite put my finger on. Eric was also responsible for the music in The Messenger, and I should imagine it's as much a dream for him to be working with such a legendary composer, as many of them inspired him to get into chiptune and into the industry altogether. The soundtrack in Sea of Stars is diverse. Mitsuda's music was known for its use of tribal sounds with ethnic and folk influences, and it's clear to me that Brown has taken influence himself from similar places. Now, while this video isn't about just the soundtrack, if you are interested in it, you can buy it, I think, for around $9.99. Certainly when I can get that on vinyl, it's going to be happening. So that's the visuals and soundtrack out the way. What's next? Well, location, location, location. No RPG is complete until it has an appropriate setting, and the world of Sea of Stars is made up of many different islands, each with their own climates and ecosystems, but you'll also find evidence of hidden cultures, with their own histories and obviously secrets. And once you've gained access to the boat, there's some freedom, allowing you to look around. That first island is known as Evermist, the home of Valere and Zale. It's a tropical and certainly lush environment, and they range from caves, lakes, mountains, forests. There's the town, and while each of these areas is distinctly different, they're clearly a part of the same place. Just jumping from one to the next, there are so many memorable places. If you're like me, you might find yourself going back to areas just because you want to see them again, not because you needed to for the actual story. There are several different towns, each with their own inhabitants, and you'll find shops, merchants, and the difficult to describe minigame wheels. This clockwork battler allows you to use two of your heroes, spin the titular wheel, and try and do damage to your enemy's base. The spinning of the wheels adds an element of chance, but there's something quite compulsive about this one, and you can play it across the entire world, wager for gold, or just enjoy it for fun. Perhaps not quite as memorable as the copycat game in Nornstein Beckler's Tent of Horrors, but maybe a little more fitting for this universe. So with the soundtrack, the visuals, and the locations out the way, you were probably waiting for this one. It's having a coherent and enjoyable storyline. Overseen by the creative director Thierry Boulanger, storyline is so important for any RPG, and I've seen a number of different takes on this. Some people absolutely loved it, others enjoyed it but felt that some of the writing perhaps wasn't up to the standard they wanted to see, but I am definitely in the former camp. Now, clearly he wanted to have a balance between something that was upbeat and cheerful and even humorous and funny, but that could hit you in the feels, that could hit you with those serious aspects. And unless you have a heart of stone, there are moments in here that will really kick you in the gut. Now, while he did have some feedback from Mitsuda and some guidance, my main takeaway from the narrative, that is probably one of the biggest compliments I could pay it, is that it's very, very easy to follow. There are so many times I found myself completely confused in RPGs and not knowing what's going on. And while you can argue that perhaps that's some complexity that I just don't understand, I think it's because a lot of the time it's just nonsense. Here, the introduction to the world is done very cleverly. The mythos and the rules of this place are established early, but the detail and nuance comes much later. In my review, I described the relationship between the three main characters as a little reminiscent to the road movie Stand By Me, but in RPG format. Those characters are relatable, Valere and Zale being the chosen ones, those solstice children. And then I've got to be honest, I think we've all felt a bit like Garl at times. Garl is their childhood friend who grew up in Mooncradle Village where the story starts and is told by most that he will amount to nothing and that these two are special and he is not, but he doesn't stand for it. And well, you'll have to find out the rest for yourself. The last component that makes Sea of Stars so great for me has briefly been mentioned there, and it's linked in many ways to the storyline, and that's humour. Some of my favourite games of all time include the Monkey Island series, Beneath a Steel Sky, and of course the legendary Space Quest. I know I'm old, it's okay. But in Sea of Stars you have the banter between the characters. They might tease or mock each other. When Sarai asks Garl why he's so obsessed with cooking, he replies, "Because unlike you, I have a passion for something other than killing people." There are some fourth wall breaking jokes in here. They're quite subtle and sometimes not so much, but they also reference Final Fantasy and other games. Character design also shows the game's humour, from a pirate with a magical shirt who rips it off to become, ripped, to a group of berserk infantile monkeys. There are so many different memorable characters that you'll meet along the way that when you take all of these elements together, it's difficult not to love Sea of Stars, even if one of them doesn't quite tickle your fancy as much as the others. For me, it's been delightful playing through with my daughter and just seeing how mesmerised she's been. Let me know in the comments if you've been enjoying the game. As I said at the start, we do have a copy to give away to one lucky person, and hopefully this video has interested you if you were thinking about picking it up. A thanks to the publisher, as I said, for sponsoring this episode, and to all of you that enjoy the content. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!